While the Chicago Bulls have started making their changes in their coaching staff, we're going to ask today, is the coaching changes just the beginning of a major overhaul for the Chicago Bulls? Some people are going to hope so. We're also going to look at Tidjane Saluan and why he could potentially be the steal of the draft, and can the Bulls afford to pass him up if he's there at number 11? Plus a little bit of the mailbag. All that and more right after this.
You are now tuned in to Chicago Bulls Central, your number one place for all Chicago Bulls news and content.
What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host there, Haize, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that being said, let's go ahead and get into it, man. So, we know that the Bulls have hired two new veteran lead assistant coaches to be on Billy Donovan's staff, and Dan Craig, and also in Wes Unseld Jr. Two hirings that I'm really happy about, right? And, you know, we've talked about it as far as like changing the sound in the locker room. That comes from Steve-O. Shout out to Steve-O for the great, the great quotable there. And it's led many people to ask about, okay, so what's next, right? And a lot of Bulls fans have seen the changes in the coaching staff, but are saying, okay, but that's not enough. And it's not, right? You have to ask yourself, what are the Bulls' focus this offseason? While AK in the season-ending press conference talked a lot about changes, right, and wanting to change the roster and getting back to more so what they did when their first year here, is that how much of an overhaul can we realistically see? And I think it comes down to this. If the Bulls are focused more on staying competitive or building for the future, or are they going to try to do what they've done before and staying competitive while building for the future? And that's where a lot of Bulls fans sit in not being quite sure on if the Bulls are able to do both at the level that they needed to really get this team out of where they are right now. You know, the Bulls have gone very high upside in a lot of their draft picks. When you look at making picks like Dalen Terry and Patrick Williams, right? Really high upside picks, two guys that are very raw, right? They have an 11th overall pick this draft, which is their second highest pick since they took over this team. And, you know, there's questions about what are they going to do there. They've also gone high upside as well with like a player like Julian Phillips and taking a gamble in the second round, who I feel pretty confident about Julian Phillips. I know very small sample size, but I feel pretty good there. And I would assume it was kind of worked out for the team, right? So, you know, ultimately, while a lot of Bulls fans want to see a drastic overhaul in the roster, per like what I said in yesterday's episode, be prepared for most of this roster to stay the same. And that is something that I truly believe, is that we're going to look at most of this roster being the same, meaning that you're probably going to Zach LaVine may not be on the roster. DeMar, one of the two of them may not be on the roster. It may be both of them. Now, if both of them are gone, I think that does, you know, signify a pretty big overhaul if that does happen. But it really comes down to where the Bulls are really trying to make their swing at. And that's the thing that has been the most difficult to gauge with this front office and this franchise and where it is right now. Yeah, you know, staying competitive. And, you know, you have some Bulls fans that say blow it all up, right? That even want to see the Bulls tank. You have some Bulls fans that are completely against tanking, which is fine. Tanking rarely works, in my opinion. But at some point, you have to make a decision on whether you're going to go and allow your young guys the time to blossom, right, and just let it be what it's going to be. And that move may come with the 2025 draft. You have a top 10 protected pick to the San Antonio Spurs, and how much of that is going to really inform what the Chicago Bulls are doing this offseason with their moves. We haven't gotten an indication one way or another yet. I would say that hearing that the Bulls rumoredly have offered DeMar DeRozan a 2-year, $40 million per deal that he turned down, to me, that tells me, hey, these guys are still trying to be where they are, right? And improve organically, however you look at that at. And that brings about its own concerns and the longevity of it and stuff like that. Because I'll tell you what, it's going to be, I truly think if you miss out on an opportunity in the top 10 of the 2025 draft, that's going to be something we drastically regret. And that's just my opinion. I know not a lot of Bulls fans share that opinion, and that's fine. But I truly think if next year we're talking about competing for a play-in spot, and we end up getting eliminated in the play-in again, and let's say we do have pick number 11 or whatever it is, and we miss out on not only keeping our first-round pick overall, but in the top 10 of the 2025 draft, I think we're all going to look back on that 4-5 years later and say, what the hell were we doing? Were we really that focused on a play-in spot that we missed out on some truly franchise-altering talent in that 2025 draft? That is like I said, my personal opinion. I don't expect everybody to share that. I know everybody is not going to share that, and that's perfectly fine. But that's truly how I feel when it comes down to it, is I just look at that draft and look at the talent that's there, right? And it's that is truly, when you Ace Bailey, Dylan Harper, Trey Johnson, right? These are players that you absolutely look at and you say, these are players that could change the direction of your franchise. And, AK and Eversley seems like they are more focused on the competing now. And I get it. Like, don't get me wrong. We in Chicago, we want to win. We deserve a winning franchise. That's something that AK said since he came in there, and it's absolutely true. The Chicago, as loyal as Chicago Bulls fans are, the fact that the United Center is still always selling out for the most part, right? We deserve a franchise that is trying to win. Don't get me wrong, but sometimes you can't miss the forest for the trees, right? You can't get caught up in momentary success that you overlook the long-term potential, right? And that's what the Bulls have to ask themselves. So when we go back to kind of the topic at hand, is what are the Bulls kind of more focused now on the long term, right? Or like, is it staying competitive or building for the future, or is it you're trying to do a mixture of both? That's something that I don't have the answer to, and I wish for the God to God I did have the answer to, but I just don't know. When you see this franchise and how they've operated, it's hard to think one way or another that they are going to do any one thing, right? And that's what leads to the uncertainty that we have around the front office right now, is that you can't bet on this front office to do anything, right? You just don't. The one thing that you can bet on, like, I know people are going to say continuity. You can bet on them not doing anything, and I can't blame you for that view. Can never blame you for that view, because that's pretty much what they've shown us at this time. They've shown us a front office that is almost terrified to really make a mistake, and they don't know how to adjust off their initial plan. I still go back to, I really do think that that AK had an initial good plan. I think that building the team that he did, albeit flawed, right, that had that team stayed healthy and that you've been able to kind of flesh that team out over time, I do think that we'd be in a much different place than what we are right now. But the woulda, coulda, shoulda only gets you so far. And at the end of the day, we are where we are. And where we are is the place that right now we have no clear direction. We have no clear outlook. We have no clear path to being a playoff team, or even a team that can compete and make it to the second round of the playoffs. We don't have that right now. Right now, we're clinging on. And like I've said for many times before, and I know, like I said, a lot of Bulls fans disagree with me, people's attachment to DeMar DeRozan, and more importantly than any even Bulls fans, the front office is going to be the thing that ultimately sinks our organization for the long term. It just is. It just, in my opinion, it just is. Unless they hit on a draft pick, they do something completely unexpected this year, those are the type of things that really can change. And not to say that you have to blow up your whole roster. You don't have to tank, right? But when you look at where this Bulls team is naturally, right? Naturally, without, like, for example, if DeMar doesn't come back, this team is a team that will be in the bottom 10 in the league. And that sucks to say, but it also, you have to come to that realization and ask yourself, all right, what's next? What's next realistically, and is what's next going to really get you to where you need to be? And that is a place that I hope AK in making these coaching changes, I hope that this really is just the beginning of the changes that we're making overall in this franchise, overall rehauling this team. Because I tell you what, if we are into a place truly of making change, and the right changes, right? The changes that are going to truly get us to being at the place that we want to be, to truly get us on the path of truly competing. Not just competing for a playing spot, but truly competing for something meaningful. Hopefully they're ready to answer those questions, and they're going to be, you got to find the difficult answers to the difficult questions. And that's something that AK and Eversley have not really showed themselves to be willing and able to do consistently, is face the difficulty. And maybe that changes. Maybe this whole thing with the coaching changes and bringing in the veterans from, winning franchises, hopefully this is a step of saying that the expectation is now changing around Chicago. I hope that it is. I would be ridiculous. It would be me being overly optimistic if I just assume that that's what they're going to do, because, like I said, I'm in my show me era. You got to show me, AK and Eversley, that you're truly willing to do whatever it takes to get this team on a path of truly being able to compete. You see a team like the Minnesota Timberwolves, of course, they got Anthony Edwards, who, by the way, who they had some motor concern issues with him as well when he came into that draft. So, when you hear about motor issues with like a Khalil Ware, remember that. But like they have a young foundation, right? They have that. Even when you look at the OKC Thunder, a team that, got eliminated, but they have that young core. We need a guy that we can truly build around. And the Bulls just don't have that yet, and we have not. We've tried to piecemeal it together, build around the players that we could, but we need a player that we can truly build around and build something sustainable around. And maybe that comes via this year's draft. With that said, that brings us to our next topic for today. And I want to talk about Tidjane Saluan. Now, this is a guy that I did cover when I was looking at multiple positions. I did cover him, but there are some draft outlets that have him listed as somebody who could potentially be the steal of the draft. There's somebody who mentioned him as being maybe the Giannis Antetokounmpo out of this draft. Now, we've never been on the right side when we go after players that have those type of comparisons. But one thing that I did like about Tidjane Saluan when I did, his draft profile is the versatility defensively, the multiple positions that he can play, and he got that dog in him and hustle. He's 18 years old. He'll be 19 most of his rookie season. This is the type of guy that you have to ask yourself is, if he's there at number 11, can the Bulls afford to pass on him because of the upside? And it really comes down to how you view upside versus somebody ready to go now. Is he a position of need for the Bulls? Is he this center that we need right now? No, he's not. I wouldn't even try to present it as that. But he does offer a versatile power forward position. Forward position where you can play either the 2 or the 3 with tremendous upside. He is a lockdown defender, which you do want to look at. That is something that he can get: the quickness, the mindset, the lateral quickness, right? At the end of the day, he's a guy, and he's coming off his career best season with shooting 3. So he's showing that he may be able to be rounded out as a shooter as well. Really great finisher around the rim. He can protect the rim pretty well. Also, he moves off the ball, which is another thing that we need a lot on this team as well. And at the end of the day, I think that if we're willing to really be this team that creates more motion in our offense, Tidjane Saluan can be somebody who flashes right away, right? He's also shown some ability to create his own shot, play make for others as well. And those are the type of things that you look for. Now, some of his negatives, of course, like he's not the best shooter off the dribble, which is something that you hope that's going to be developed into him for sure. And then he's never really been a good shooter. He's had one season of being a solid shooter, and so you worry about that being consistent. He's also been a sloppy passer at times, which causes turnovers. But when you look at somebody who's 6'9", with a 7'1" wingspan, which kind of fits the mold of the players that AK likes to draft, he's hugely athletic, fits that athletic profile that AK likes as well, and the tremendous upside, you got to start asking yourself, if he's there at number 11, which most mocks do have him being there at number 11, some have him going as low as like 15, can you afford to pass up on the guy that has this type of upside for the Chicago Bulls? And it comes down to, this is a draft with a lot of upside, right? A lot of guys. Khalil Ware is one of those guys that has tremendous upside, right? I always go back to him because it is upside. Tyler Smith is a guy who has tremendous upside in this type of draft, right? And all drafts are about upside to a degree, right? You, of course, have your players that are ready to go right now, like a Connect. He's a guy that you immediately understand who and what he's going to be coming into the NBA. But you got to ask yourself, if the Bulls are trying to build for the future rather than just focus on the now, a guy like Tidjane Saluan is a guy that you try to take if that's the case right now. Are there more surefire bets? Sure, right? But if this guy absolutely does end up turning into the steal of the draft, and one thing that we've said before is that as AK, you got to start hitting on these draft picks. And if you can get the guy who's going to be the steal of the draft in this type of draft that's labeled as a weaker draft, that's what you want to try to do. Now, it comes down to the Bulls and their evaluation and once they start doing these one-on-one workouts and things like that. But Tidjane Saluan is a guy who is turning a lot of heads in the draft, and a lot of GMs have him pegged as potentially being one of the better players to come out of this draft. And so the unproven nature of him as a player is a part of the reason why he's going where he is in most of these mocks. But I tell you what, if you let him end up going to a team like the OKC Thunder that pick at number 12, if he goes to a team like the Sacramento Kings that pick at number 13, God forbid, the Miami Heat at number 15, right? And then he ends up hitting for those teams, those would be the type of moves that those teams keep doing in the way they keep striking on the draft and hitting on their draft picks that the Bulls just need to do. I'm in no way saying that my pick in this would absolutely be Tidjane Saluan, but I am saying that you got to at least give it some thought and some credence and ask yourself. Now, you got to, has AK been the best at projecting development? That's another thing, but he's a guy who doesn't have like the motor concern issues. He doesn't have the issues of kind of the mindset. He's a player that's going to attack. He's going to get out. He's going to own his own development, and that's something that you hope for as well. So, I think ultimately, if the Bulls were to go to Tidjane Saluan at number 11 in this draft, it's going to be something that a lot of Bulls fans are going to question. Why didn't we get a center, especially with the centers that are projected to still be on the board when the Bulls pick there? But I think that ultimately, if it ends up working out, Bulls fans are going to buy into it. And it's just about making the right moves that are going to lead the Bulls to actually be winning. And that's what AK and Eversley have to ask themselves in this type of draft. Is this the move that gets you to being an actual competitor and contending long term? It may be a rough 2 years or so with Tidjane Saluan as he rounds out his games just to the NBA. But you got to ask yourself, 3-4 years down the road, are we going to look back on it and say, we got the steal in the draft? And that's something that you definitely got to ask yourself. And that's something you got to, not just with Tidjane Saluan, you got to ask yourself overall in this draft, is that, are you making the right type of moves with getting whoever you end up getting? Are they going to be a guy that you're 2-3 years down the road saying, yeah, we got our guy? Or is it going to be somebody that maybe 2 or 3 years down the road, you're going to say, we missed on a couple of people. We didn't evaluate them right, but hey, we got a center though. Like that's what you got to ask yourself. But guys, let me know what you guys think down below on Tidjane Saluan. As always, let's go and get into it. I said I wanted to get into the mailbag a little bit. We got one voicemail. This one's from Todd.
Yo, what up, Haize? It's Todd, man. Was calling after your Sunday mailbag in response to the first caller with regard to the Magic trade for Zach and that 18th pick. Genius. You know why? Not because of the 18th pick, but because we need to be doing everything we can, bro, to be focused on 2025. There is not a player in that top 10 that we cannot use. I'm sure you've already looked at it. I know we're not talking about it yet, but I'm not saying we're about tanking. But if we can get two players in this draft that I think is actually strong, to your point, there ain't no Wimbies, but there's certainly good foundational players in this 2024 draft. Couple them with our young players, obviously Kobe, Io, Julian, P. Will, whatever, and so forth. And then add potentially a Dylan Harper, an Ace Bailey. I'm not even going for a Cooper Flagg, a DJ Edgecombe or going down, Colin Murray Boyle. They're all bangers. So to me, that sets us up perfectly for next year's draft. So yeah, I would do that in a heartbeat. Shout to that caller. I just wanted to throw that out there. All right, bro. Later.
I agree with you. Everything is should be about the 2025 draft. I'm sorry, and I know I've said it before, and I know a lot of Bulls fans did not agree. To me, if you look at DeMar DeRozan and you say that he is worth passing up on those players that are in the top 10, I got to question your sanity. Just real talk. Like, it's the 2025 draft is going to be the most stacked draft we're probably going to have in the next 3 to 5 years. And so if you can add the right talent in this draft, while also, developing some of the players you already have in Julian and Dave and Patrick Williams, getting the right player, whoever that ends up being in this draft, right? And then, doubling down and keeping your own pick in 2025, that's when you start building and creating a young core that you can really build something around that's going to be meaningful over time, right? So often with this Bulls team, we get players and we draft players, but they end up not really being much for the Bulls, right? And so if you really want an opportunity to have a young player that you could build around, the 2025 draft offers a lot of that. Now, of course, it's unfortunate. The Bulls it's not completely in their control. If they were to, be a bad enough team, like you said, it's not about necessarily tanking. You don't want to sell off pieces that are part of your future just so you can be bad to get in the 2025 draft. But here's what I'll say. The Bulls are only a couple of wins or a couple of losses, however you want to look at it, less of being a top 10 team this year. So, you gotta really ask yourself, like, when you're looking at that top 10 protection, which is still crazy that we gave up a pick that was top 10 protected in a sign and trade. Teams usually do not get a whole hell of a lot of back in sign and trades. The Chicago Bulls would be the team that gave up that type of pick that ends up being in that deep of a draft in a sign and trade. It's just the Bulls, man. The luck just sucks. But you really got to evaluate that. And that is something that AK also needs to be doing in whatever moves he does this year. You have to also be looking at How does that coincide with your 2025 chances of keeping that pick, right? In that draft, you want to try to be in that draft. I truly think you want to try you want to be in that draft. If you can keep your own pick, that is the best case scenario for a team in the long term, in my personal opinion. And that's where the Bulls can really start trying to make a move in really getting this team to the place that we all want it to be and actually contending. And that is a deep draft. That is a franchise altering draft if you can get a top 10 pick in that draft. And so we'll end up seeing, man. I think, I've already definitely been looking ahead of that. I'll be watching out all those guys over the course of the year as well. But I mean, it's out of the Bulls' control entirely, right? Yeah, they have control over it if they're just bad, right? But I think ultimately it just comes down to what is AK? Is AK willing? And the thing I've always said and how I've always phrased it, are you willing to take a small step backward or a step backward to eventually take the longer term step forward for this team? That is the biggest question that face this front office. And unfortunately, we don't really have answers to that yet. We have bits and glimpses of it. We have words that they've shown, but we don't really have the actions behind it that we can say for sure that this is a front office that's willing to take that step back so that they can take the longer term view and step forward, and a fan base that may not be patient enough for it. But like I've said before, when you're a front office and you're running a team, you sometimes got to do the right move and let the fans be upset for a little while. And if it ends up being the right move in the long haul, they're going to turn around for you. And that's all that it comes down to, right? So that's my thought process. Great voicemail there, Todd. Thank you for calling in. Make sure you guys are following the show at Bull Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns. BullCentralPod@gmail.com. Lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We are the number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related, thanks to you guys. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See right if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.